Welcome back to Lambda School's Intro to Web Development class. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about properties, math operators, and global objects. So in the last lesson, we talked about primitive data types, and one of those data types is a number. JavaScript also gives us, as a language, math operators, and math operators that are pretty normal, we're pretty much accustomed to. Operators such as the plus sign, so we can add two numbers together. We have a minus sign, we can subtract two numbers. Multiplication, so we can multiply two numbers, or as many numbers as we want. I shouldn't just say this is only for two numbers. We can, string these together. And a division sign. And so these are all work the same exact way they would work on a general calculator for us. One of the first jobs a computer ever had was to compute numbers, and so having these symbols in here just makes total sense. And so one sign that we probably have never seen before is the modulo sign. And it's this percentage sign, and what it actually does is it divides the first number by the second number. So in this case, 7 divided by 3 is 2 with a remainder of 1, and it returns that remainder. So it doesn't return the actual division sign or whatever the product is from the division. It actually returns the remainder only. So let's take a look at what that looks like right here. So of course we have our 1 plus 1, and we can see we get 2. We have 2, let's do 15 minus 9, switch it up a little bit and we'll get 6, right? 10 multiplied by 45. We're going to get 450, and you'll look over here, you'll see that we're getting the numbers over here. And then 144 divided by 12, and we're going to get 12, which is 144 divided by 12. So let's look at actually what happens if we say 145 divided by 12. We're going to get what we call a float, and that's just a decimal, and the actual value of 144 divided by 12. All right, we're not going to get that even 12. I'll show you the way later how we can get an even 12 out of it, but we still want to know about that extra piece. All right, and so that's where the modulo comes in. So if I said 145 modulo 12, what it's going to do is it's going to divide 145 by 12. It's going to get that 12 whole number, right? And then it's going to realize that that is 1, right? That's the remainder of 1. And so it's going to give us that remainder back. And you'll see there it's 1. Same thing in 146. Obviously, it's a remainder of 2. So if I did 146, 16 with a line over it, modulo 146 is 2. Okay, so it's a really cool feature. You might be thinking to yourself, that's kind of cool, but I don't know when I'm ever going to use that. There's some great use cases for it. It's great to know what the actual whole number remainder is that you've gone over, if there is a whole number remainder, right? So if this is 144 divided by 12 is 12 with no remainder, and we're going to get 0 out of that. So that tells us automatically that 12 goes into 144 equally, right? So you can maybe start to formulate a little bit of like, why would I ever use this type of thing in your head? But just know that these simple math operations are available to us. And this new operator, the modulo, is available to us as well. All right, so another thing I wanted to talk about in this lesson were two ideas called properties and methods. When we wrote our primitive data types, in this case, you'll see a string on the screen. Let informs the computer that there's a variable. Name is the name of the variable. We have assigned that using the assignment operator to the string of Dan. Properties are these little pieces of metadata we can get about these strings or numbers or booleans, and every single piece of primitive data structure, data type, has these properties available to them. So how we access that property is just like you see on the screen. We give the name of the variable and we say dot and then the name of the property we want. Okay, and that's what that blue arrow is pointing to, the name of the property. In this case, all strings have a property on it called length, and it gives us the length of the string itself. So let's use this example, and we're going to say name, right? Name is the variable, and what does name equal? What is it assigned to? What value is it assigned to? It's assigned to this string of Dan. So name is essentially Dan, right? But we've given it a variable. We can pass this value around wherever we want, and I'll show you how we can change it in just a moment as well. So it has a property on it called length, and this, every single string has a length property. And if we run this, we're going to see that we get 3. Now think for a second about what that 3 is. If you guessed it's the amount of characters in the string, then you're absolutely correct. Now think for a second if I put a space and my last name. So let's look at this. My first name has 3 letters. My last name has 6 letters. What do you think name.length is now going to point out to the screen? Think for a moment. If you said 11, sorry, I'm afraid my last name has 7 letters. If you said 10, you're probably almost there. If you said 11, you were right. Because the length also considers the space a character. So you can have a whole ton of space in there, and it's going to consider that space. And you can have numbers in there, and it's going to tell us exactly 1, all right, Dan, there's a space, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way through 29 characters on this. So properties are available all over the place. There's tons of properties on strings, numbers, booleans. You can go and look it up in MDN or W3 or on the internet somewhere and find the different properties for strings, numbers, and booleans, because there's a bunch of them. Second, we're going to talk about methods. So where properties will just return some form of metadata about the item, methods are actually going to manipulate the item somehow, right? And so in this case, that's a little wrong. We'll go look at this in just a moment. The difference between a method and a property we can see is that it's pretty much the same except for those parentheses on the end. Those parentheses actually allow us to call a method, and that will actually invoke a function. We'll learn about functions in a little bit, but it invokes the function and it manipulates the data and gives us some new data back. So methods are actually going to manipulate the item or the data in some way. So let's go num, we're going to call this favorite number. Favorite num equals 42. I'm going to comment this out. If you don't know about commenting yet, I'll just point it out while we're here. Commenting actually allows us to write whatever we want, and the computer won't read it. And write so if there's anything we don't want the computer to read, like right now I don't really want it to read this stuff because I want to just see this on the screen, or we can leave notes to ourselves or other developers in there. So we can say like this next variable is a number. All right, we can leave notes in here for ourselves or other developers. So this is called a comment. We can do that with 2 forward slashes anywhere in our code we want. All right, so let's take our variable and let's call a method on it. So this method we're going to call is called toString. And remember, if I just call toString right here, it's going to give us back some funky stuff. So we need to, methods, we need to use those open and close parentheses. And we'll learn what those mean in a later video. But for right now, just know that we can just put those open and close parentheses. That means it's a method. And that means it's going to manipulate the data somehow. So look at this. We have a number 42. And then when we call toString, it then gives us back that number as a string. Remember I said if any characters have an open and closed quotes around it, that it's automatically a string. Well, that's the case here. We can do this. You'll see that it's just 42, no string. And now it's 42 as a string. So this is called a method. And methods allow us to manipulate data a little bit. There are tons of methods out there as well. We'll go over a few of them in the future, but it's worthwhile to go and check the different methods out and see what you can do with them. One more thing I wanted to talk about is what we call global objects. So global objects are these objects or pieces of data that JavaScript gives us for free. They're just part of the language. They allow us to do certain things. So if I told you you've been using a global object this whole time, I hope you believe me in that we have that console object, remember? And console, when we call it, refers to this output. So console is a global object. We didn't declare the console variable anywhere in here, right? But we have access to a log method. And look at this. Just like this, console has a log method, right? And in this, we actually put some data in here. So I can say, I'm in the console. And there, look at that. We now have a message logged in the console. I can also pass variables into my log method. So favorite number, look at that. All I'm doing is passing a variable in, and it's going to give us that variable output. And I can pass strings in, I can pass whatever I want, right? If I want to write multiple things, I can. I just have to use a comma to separate them. Now look at that. I got a number and the string. I can even do something like this. And I'll get 3 items put out because I have comma separated them. Just know that you can do a lot of cool things with the console, and this is a global object. It is an object that JavaScript gives us for free. One other global object we have is known as the math object. So I'm going to comment that out. We can use the uppercase math. So we have our regular math operators, plus, minus, subtract, divide, etc. But what if we want more powerful math operators that we can't just use a simple one symbol operator for? Something like a power. We can use our global object with a method of pow. And pow takes 2 numbers. Just like console log took a couple of different items, pow takes 2 different items. So pow takes a number raised to an exponent. So if I said 4 here, this is going to be 2 to the little 4 up on top, right? So this is 2 to the 4th power right here. And then you'll see it's 16. And we can see that over and over again, 32, 64, etc. And we can do anything in here. We can do 6 to the 6th power. It's probably going to be a large number. Well, not that big. 46,000. So PAL lets us raise a number to a certain power. So that we don't have to do etc., right? We can just do 6 to the 6th power. So math has a bunch of these cool built-in methods. PAL is one of them, and I told you earlier that I was going to show you some way to just get 12 when it was actually 12.08666666, whatever, right? And it has the round method as well. And so round method is going to, needs to be an actual number, round the number off for us to the nearest whole number. Round was going to work just like any kind of rounding operation you've ever done traditionally. If it's 0.5 or above, it's going to round it up. If it's 0.4999 or below, it's going to round it down. Right? So if I say 12.4866, we're still going to get 12. If I say 5, we're going to get 13. So you might be saying, well, what if I always want to round it up? Or if I always want to round it down? Well, if we want to round it down, we can use the floor. And now we can see, even if it's 0.5 or above, it'll round it down for us. Okay, and this could be 9866, and it still rounds it down. On the flip side of that, we can use another one called seal, and this stands for ceiling. I think it should have been called roof personally. It would have made it a lot nicer. Floor, roof, rather than floor, seal, right? But this is what we get. So seal is always going to round it up, even if it's below 0.5. And look at that, 13. These are just a few of the many operators and methods that the math object has. But also know that there's a ton of built-in global objects, JavaScript like console and math, and they all have these methods on them. And it's worth looking up on Mozilla Developer Network, all of the different possibilities. All right, that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.